Hey, it's Halftime Howie here with former Ranger legend and Long Beach native Pete Stemkowski. And Pete, I'd be amiss if I didn't talk to you about the passing of a true hockey icon, Hall of Fame, the great Gordie Howe. You played with him and against him. So what are your thoughts reflecting on the great Gordie Howe?
When I broke into the National Hockey League back in the 60s, there's only 6 teams. So I was with Toronto and he was with Detroit. And one of the things that I learned right away is don't go too close to Gordie Howe. Don't give him a cheap shot, because if you do, he's going to get you back later on. And there was many a times on a follow-through on a shot that would miss me a little bit, or that elbow might come up a little bit. But he was in his prime back then, and he get the puck and could do so many things with it. And then Howie had the good fortune of, I think at least my good fortune was I got traded from the Toronto Maple Leafs to the Detroit Red Wings. And, there was Mr. Hockey there, Gordie Howe, sitting in the locker room with us. And, sometimes you don't know how you're going to be accepted. I mean, Norm Ullman, Paul Henderson, and Floyd Smith, they had left the Detroit Red Wings. So here comes Pete Stemkowski, Frank Mahovlich, and Gary Unger into the room. And, their friends are gone, and suddenly we stepped in. And to this day, I always remember when I walked in that room for the first time, the guy that came to the door to greet us and says, "Welcome to Detroit Red Wings," was Gordie Howe. So he took us, embraced us, and had a couple of years with Gordie. It was towards the tail end of his career, but a gentleman all the way. And if you went in and got to know him, he was just one of the guys. If you were going out for a cold one after the game or something, he was right there. He was never had that ego, never had that superstar status. And as long as I knew him, he was always one of the boys, and he always played for the love of the game. So I think lastly, as Wayne Gretzky said in an interview, when they start talking about the greatest hockey players of all time, they put Gordie Howe at number 1, and then they start a new list. So that's how good he was when he was in his prime.
And don't you think it was very special that when they started the WHA, he got to play with both of his sons with the Hartford Whalers? That had to be, from a personal standpoint, something very special for Gordie.
Well, he was 52 years old. I remember, I'm past 52. And, when you hit that big 50, you got to go get these reading glasses. And, sometimes you go into the bathroom 2 or 3 times during the course of the night. Those kind of situations as you get old. And, God bless him. He wanted to play with his kids. Mark and Marty used to come on the ice for the morning skates over at the Olympia, and they were skating around. They were, as high as our knees back then. Now they're grown men and scouts. And there was Gordie, and I was just watching the other day. They showed the 1980 All-Star game that was played in Detroit, and I think he got a 3-minute standing ovation. And I'm watching the game, and I'm counting. This is 1980. He was playing, and I started doing the fingers and the toes. When he played in that game, he was 50 years of age, and Wayne Gretzky was 19 years of age. So at 50 years of age, he was playing at the National Hockey League level, and he was holding his own. I believe he got an assist in that game, and he did not look out of place. So, the thing with Gordie Howe is we talk about everything that he did on the ice and, in the locker room and things like that. But, off the ice, he was such a great ambassador. Anywhere he'd go, if he saw a kid, he wouldn't just stick out his hand and say hello. He'd say, what position do you play? Where are you from? He actually took an interest in other people. And when you met somebody like Gordie Howe, he made you feel good about yourself. That's the kind of a real gentleman he was, both on and not so much gentleman on the ice, but just off the ice. Just a tremendous ambassador, for the game of hockey.
Yeah, and you think back to those golden years of hockey, and think of all the superstars at such a high level between Gordie Howe, Bobby Hull, Bobby Orr, Jean Beliveau, the Rocket. That was really a special time in the NHL.
Well, I'd like to think so. But, I played against Jean Beliveau when I was playing in Winnipeg. I was 3 feet tall, listening to Hockey Night in Canada on the radio back in Canada. And there was Jean Beliveau playing for the Montreal Canadiens. And then, several years later, I step on the ice at Maple Leaf Gardens, and I'm taking a face-off against him. And then, we all know about Bobby Hull and that 100-mile-an-hour slap shot when, goalkeepers would just duck when he would shoot the puck. And, we had characters back then besides the Jean Beliveau. Bobby Orr. We played junior hockey. He was 14 years of age. He came out to the Maple Leaf Gardens when I was playing junior there. And we looked at this kid. He was 14 years old playing junior hockey. 14. And he's ended up to be one of the greats of all time. So, I feel very blessed that I was able to, play with and against some of the great players that ever played the National Hockey League.
And how many people can say they played with the greatest player ever, Gordie Howe? And Pete Stemkowski had that that great honor and privilege back in the day with the Detroit Red Wings. And he lived 88 years. He had a great life. And not only was a great player, but like you said, a true gentleman. So, Gordie Howe, rest in peace.
Yes, we celebrate his life.